So the goals for today, the first one is to learn how to book appointments through sharing your availability outside of Dubsado. We're also going to learn how to book appointments through sharing your availability inside of Dubsado. And then we also want to cover how to book appointments for your clients and how you can do that. And then we're also going to talk about how to manage those bookings, which really just means what about rescheduling, canceling? How does all of that work? So we have had a lot of other sessions already about creating scheduler templates, how it works with your calendar, how to get new leads into Dubsado, which we're going to cover some of that today. And so if you haven't seen those other webinars that we've done for this series, just jump into our YouTube and you can find all three, or we've done 3 or 4 webinars already, and you can find those in our YouTube channel to get some of that previous information, since we can't cover everything that we've already gone through with this workshop series. So let's go ahead and we're just going to dive right in here. And the first thing I want to talk about is booking appointments outside of Dubsado. So what does that mean? If I'm wanting to book an appointment outside of Dubsado, that means that my availability is being sent to somebody who's either not in Dubsado yet. So I'm booking it outside of Dubsado. They're not in the system yet. So we're talking about embedding on your website. We're talking about just using the direct link to put on Instagram or Facebook. If you're texting the link to somebody, anyone who's not in the system, I'm booking it outside of Dubsado. Or another instance of this is someone who just doesn't have a project created yet. So that's what I mean by booking an appointment outside of Dubsado. Now, typical appointment types for this would be consultations, discovery calls, any type of first contact appointments when I'm first reaching out to them and they're not in the system yet. Appointment-based services from your website, so like mini sessions, which my colleague Sam is doing a webinar next Tuesday on mini sessions and how to set those up. So this would be anyone where you have a service that you're putting on your website and you want someone to book a time slot on your website for a specific service that you're running. Mini sessions is a best example for that. So that's what we mean by booking an appointment outside of Dubsado. Your availability is being publicly shared with somebody. So some business advice that I want to give you, because it's going to maybe influence the way that you book your clients, especially if you're newer to business, trying to get an understanding on that. Booking appointments outside of Dubsado allows you to take on a higher quantity of leads because of the access to your availability. So because you have your availability on your website, or it's on your Instagram or on your Facebook, people will be able to access you more freely, which means that the quantity of leads that you have will probably increase. But it also means that you have the potential for lower quality of leads because anyone can book you. So because it's out there and anyone can get on your schedule, you might find that there's people who may not be as interested as they may seem up front. It means that you might have people you might get a lot of no-shows, or people who don't really fit your budget. So having your availability out there so people can book with you on your website, you might not have the most quality leads, but you will probably see a lot more of an influx of new leads because your availability is front facing to that client. So that's just what that will do for you from a business perspective. Now, for sharing this, if you are going to embed this on your website, if you're planning on putting this on your Facebook or your Instagram or LinkedIn, your availability is what we're talking about. You're going to use the iframe code or the direct link from the scheduler template itself. So let me show you what that means here. If we go into Dubsado and we have our different appointments, scheduler templates that we have created here. Inside each one of these templates, there's a little link icon, and we covered this in one of the previous webinars, but just a quick rehash. When you click on this copy link, you get 2 different links. You get the iframe code, which is how you embed it on your website, and you also get this direct link. If you are using this method, this next section that we're going to talk about is very important, so you'll want to tune in specifically for this if you're planning on embedding your availability on your website, or just taking this link and sending it to anyone who's interested, putting this link on your Facebook or on your Instagram. So with this method, this means that you are planning on booking an appointment outside of Dubsado. You're sending your availability or putting it out there for someone who's not in the system yet. So let's talk about what the goals are that every business owner has when they're trying to book an appointment in Dubsado. There's primary goals and secondary goals, and I'll explain what those mean here. So when booking an appointment outside of Dubsado, so if you're embedding it, putting it on a website, there are two primary goals and two secondary goals that everyone is trying to accomplish. It doesn't matter what industry. You're trying to get your appointment booked, get them on the calendar. You want to get a project created. Those are the two primary goals. A lot of people are focused on the appointment being booked, but they don't really understand projects, or they're not sure if they need projects. So I want to take a moment right here in the webinar to talk about the importance of getting a project created. The project in Dubsado is going to be the folder for that client. It's how you send contracts. It's how you create invoices. It's how your workflows run. You can keep your appointments inside of a project, contracts getting signed, tasks that you want to get completed, notes that you want to keep on the client. Everything that you do with a client runs through a project in Dubsado. It's a project-based platform. If you're a client-based industry like coaching, where the term project doesn't really make too much sense, you can think about it as a folder for that client that you're working with. It's where everything is kept. So if you are putting your availability on the website, there's two main things that you want to have happen. It's a non-negotiable. You want an appointment being booked, and you want that project to get created. Now, there are secondary goals. These secondary goals aren't mandatory, but typically people want these things, or they may need these things. They're optional. That is to get a workflow applied, and also maybe they might need a booking fee or a deposit to get made. Those four things, when it comes to sharing your availability on a website or putting it on Facebook or anything like that, those are usually the four pieces of criteria that everyone wants to get accomplished. Two are optional. You might not need a workflow to start. You might like one, but you might not need one. And a deposit paid, maybe you don't really do that with your consultations, and that's fine. But the two non-negotiables that you absolutely have to get set up is you want to get your appointment booked, and you want to get that project created. In order to accomplish those primary goals, you need two things. You need your scheduler template, so they can do the first piece, which is book the appointment. That one's really obvious. But then you also need a project creating form to go with that scheduler template. In Dubsado, our scheduler templates cannot create these folders or these projects. They can't do them on their own. So they need a little help. And you can do that by adding a project creating form to go with that scheduler template. And the two forms that we have in Dubsado that can create a new project for you or a new folder is a lead capture form and a public proposal. Now, you may, if you've seen all of the different pieces of this workshop series, Sam highlighted a lot of this in the very first webinar. So some of this might be a little bit of a repeat for you, but it's very important with that second piece that you have that project creating form that goes with that scheduler, so that you can have a project created and the appointment booked. You get both of those done at the same time. So what does that look like then? So we're going to talk about this in this first sequence here, and hopefully this will make sense for you. And then we'll take this sequence and then put it in Dubsado terms so you can see. So with this first sequence, this is what ends up happening. You have your scheduler and your lead capture form. You're going to attach your project creating form outside of Dubsado. You're going to join those together. So you have your scheduler and your lead capture together outside of Dubsado. Once they fill out that lead capture, it's going to create the project. And then if you want your workflow to get applied, that will also start from your lead capture as well. That project will add that workflow in there. So this is the sequence that most people, I would say this is probably the most common situation that people would use if they are putting their availability on their website. So you want your scheduler and the lead capture together outside of Dubsado. And then once they fill out the lead capture portion, this part right here is technically what adds that project, not the scheduler, but the lead capture. So that gray box is really that piece that ties everything in together and what actually gets them into Dubsado. Once that project gets created, that appointment also goes in that project. So you also have that ability as well to have that and get included. So what does that mean from a Dubsado standpoint? So in Dubsado, what you will want to do in order to book this appointment properly is in your scheduler template, in the advanced tab, we talked about this a little bit last week, in the additional form section right here, you want to include a lead capture form or a public proposal. I'll talk about that in a second as far as how you do it with a public proposal. But with the lead capture form, that's going to essentially create that project for you, and you would attach your workflow to your lead capture form, because the lead capture, as we looked at here, is what creates the project and applies that workflow. So it all centers around the lead capture form. So a quick order of events: the client books the appointment, the client fills out the lead capture form, the project gets created, the workflow gets applied, the appointment gets put in the project, and like we talked about last week, if you were here for last week's session, the scheduler will send out any confirmation emails or appointment reminders, so you don't need it in your workflow. It's actually a part of the scheduler template itself, the confirmation email and also the appointment reminders. So that's the order of events that things go through when you're booking the appointment that way. Again, the most crucial piece, you have to have that project creating form in that additional form slot. The only two forms that work for that, lead capture form and a public proposal. If you have a questionnaire in there, it will not create a new project. What you would need to do is take that questionnaire, and you can actually just click and drag and move it into the lead capture form slot. The biggest difference, and I would say probably the only difference with a questionnaire and a lead capture, is a lead capture can create a new project, or it does actually. It's not can, it does. It creates a new project each time. A questionnaire does not. That's really the biggest difference between those two forms. So if you have a questionnaire in that slot, just move it to a lead capture, so that way you get that project creating in there, in the folder. Or sorry, in the actual account. So with this here, that's what you'll want to do, is add that lead capture form to the advanced tab on that side of it. So that's one way of doing it. The next way we're going to talk about is if you need a deposit to get made. So this is where a lead capture form and a public proposal could potentially come into place here. So let's open up this sequence and talk about booking appointments this way. So as you can see here, it's very similar to what we just looked at. There's just one extra piece, and that's the deposit paid portion. So in here, we have the scheduler, and then the lead capture or public proposal. That's going to be that centerpiece. That's what's going to create the project, apply the workflow. That's really what gets them inside of Dubsado. So you have that piece there, and then you can also add the deposit paid portion. From a Dubsado standpoint, what that means is on your scheduler template, you're actually clicking this invoice section together so that they can make a payment once they're done. So what does this look like? So let me show you, just from an actual scheduler perspective, the similarities between these two. So if I add in, let's say that I want to do a deposit for, we'll just say $100, that it's $100 to get on the phone with me. It's actually not, but let's just say, for example, it is $100. So once you have this in there, I'm just going to save this. What that now means, I have a contact form. So I have my lead capture in this slot here. So now if I open this up, I'm just going to grab this link and I'm going to paste it, because remember, this is just, I'm sending this link to somebody. So this is what ends up happening is you have your availability on the first slot here. So they can go through, they can book their time with you. So let's say Thursday, 10 a.m., and we'll add that in there. I'm going to book an appointment with myself at 10 a.m. Now they get to the lead capture form portion, or if it's a public proposal, works the same way. But this is what is creating that project. And then you can start your workflow from this form. So they would fill this out. Then after that, it takes them to the invoice portion. And this is where the $100 would be required in order to lock in that booking. So if we take this and run it in the same comparison here, scheduler, lead capture form, deposit paid, they pay that deposit. Now, one very important piece here to understand is that the deposit being paid does not create the project and apply the workflow. The lead capture form does. So what does that mean? Once they're done filling out this lead capture form, you will see a project created in Dubsado. Even if they haven't paid the deposit, you will have that project get created and a workflow will be applied at the same time if you have a workflow applied to your lead capture, if it's tied into it. So it's not based off of the deposit that the workflow starts. It's based off of the lead capture form getting filled out. However, follow along with me here. The workflow will still get applied, but the appointment will not get put into that project until they pay their deposit. So that deposit does have some control. Once they schedule, fill out the lead capture and pay the deposit, at only that time does the appointment go onto your calendar or go into the project. The workflow will still get applied. So a lot of people might say, well, I don't want it to start until they pay their deposit. I'm glad you asked that question. Let me show you what you can do to control that. So what you would want to do is in your workflow, and we're going to talk about this next Friday when we talk about schedulers and workflows, we'll dive into a little bit further. What you would want to do is you would want your first workflow action to be after invoice is paid in full, because at this space, they're paying this full invoice, $100 up front. So with that being said, whatever the required amount is to get it locked in, they're paying that up front. So what you would want to do is in your workflow, you would have it would still get applied, but that first action wouldn't run until they pay their deposit. So if you have a method that looks like this, what you would want to do is you would have your workflow get applied, but that first action wouldn't be until the invoice is paid in full. So it's technically on that project, but it's going to wait until it sees that they paid that invoice amount. That's how you can tie the workflow in with that deposit being paid. Remember though, the scheduler, that appointment won't actually get put on your calendar until they pay the deposit. So you won't see an appointment on there or anything like that. They do have to pay that amount in order for it to go on your calendar. But you do have to pay attention to the fact that the deposit being paid doesn't create the project and apply the workflow. The lead capture does. So just remember that when you're putting that sequence together, and that might change how you do your workflows that get added in there. So order of events, just so you can understand what is happening in real time as people are going through this. The client books an appointment, they pick their time, they fill out the lead capture form or public proposal, the project gets created next, then the invoice gets created in the project right after that, and also the workflow gets applied. That's the piece that a lot of people might miss, is what's happening in Dubsado once they fill out that lead capture. Then the client pays the required amount. And then once they pay that, then the appointment goes into the project. And again, because they're booking on that scheduler, the confirmation emails and the appointment reminders, all of those go out because they booked on the scheduler. They don't need to be in your workflow at all. So that one's a little bit trickier, but hopefully that makes sense on the succession of events and how it happens. And hopefully this diagram helps you understand what is actually getting them into Dubsado. It's that lead capture form. By the end of this webinar, you will probably be so tired of hearing me say lead capture form, but it's very important because that's really what gets them in the system and gets them rolling. So those are the two ways that you can book somebody outside of Dubsado. How you do it is really up to you, as far as if you are using the iframe code, if you're using the direct link, what lead captures are attached. That might vary business to business. You really have to map out what is happening so you can see it from a 30,000 foot view of what's going on inside of Dubsado. But that's how it works in Dubsado. So now that you know the tools to do it, now it's your turn to map out exactly how things are going to go in the right succession. So that's how you can book people outside of Dubsado. The next thing we're going to talk about, we'll scroll past here, is booking appointments inside of Dubsado. So that means that your availability is not out for everybody to see. Only people who are qualified or who fill out a lead capture form, or maybe they do the public proposal first before they get the appointment. This is always what happens after they're already in the system. So this is going to be more focused around businesses that do a lot of qualifying up front. It's not about quantity and how many people they can get on their calendar. It's about, I want to make sure that every person I talk to is qualified, whether it's the budget, whether it is the scope of the project. You don't have enough time to take on this work. You always want to qualify that lead before you actually reach out and say, okay, now get on my calendar. So this is going to be more of the sequencing for those types of businesses that you do qualifying up front. So who this is for, this means that you are sharing your availability with someone who's already submitted a lead capture form or public proposal. Your availability is getting sent out after they inquire, or they already have a project created. They're already in Dubsado. Any type of appointment can really be booked with this, because you can do paid sessions. You technically can still send out your consultation after they inquire. So it's really any type of appointment at this time. Normally with booking appointments outside of Dubsado, those are typically only going to be your consultations, discovery calls, things of that nature. But booking appointments inside of Dubsado, it's really any type of appointment at that point, because they're in the system. You can send them anything at that point. So some business advice, we're going to take that same concept from booking outside of Dubsado and now talk about it inside of Dubsado. What's the benefits of doing it this way? Booking appointments in Dubsado allows you to take on higher quality leads. We talked about that, because you have that chance to qualify them, but potentially lower quantity of leads because there's more friction to get on the calendar. So what do I mean by friction? Not that it's glitchy or that it doesn't work appropriately. Friction meaning that they first have to inquire and fill out a form, and then once you qualify them, then they have to get on your calendar. The other way, they're getting on your calendar immediately. So there is one extra layer of friction from them getting onto your calendar if you decide you want to qualify them. But you do have higher quality leads because you have the chance to see if it's going to be a good fit to work with them. A lot of businesses that maybe they have a lot of revenue coming through, and they know their clientele, they know exactly who they want to work with, and they don't want to work with someone who doesn't have the budget, or they don't have the time to take it on, or even it might be the fact that you as a business owner, you don't feel comfortable doing the work that they're needing. Maybe you don't have the expertise to do what they're wanting. So you have a chance to qualify that before you even get on the phone with them. So that's kind of just a business advice aspect of what that means by doing it the other way. And sharing this, what you're going to do, instead of sharing your calendar here in the scheduler template section with the iframe code and the direct link, you're actually going to be sharing this from the lead capture form perspective. So with your lead capture forms, if you click the share button on these, this is what you're going to be using instead. You're going to embed this on your website where they're filling out a form first. You're not sharing your availability outside of Dubsado. You're just letting them fill out a form first. One thing that you're probably realizing, though, is that out of all of these different methods, the lead capture form is the crux to all of this. It's that focal center point that ties everything into the system, or public proposal. Most of the time, I usually see people using lead capture forms, but public proposals do the same thing. We'll look at those in just a little bit. So instead of sharing your lead or your scheduler with the iframe code or direct link, you're sharing your lead capture form iframe code or direct link. You're putting this on your Instagram so someone can fill out that lead first, and then later you'll send them out the availability. Or you're embedding that on your website where they just fill out the form first, then you'll talk to them at a later time. So that's the difference in sharing. Is one is you're sharing the iframe code from the scheduler. The other one is that you're sharing it from the lead capture form. Hopefully that makes sense. So now let's talk about the goals now. So the last one we looked at appointment being booked and project getting created. Those were the primary goals. Now the order is going to switch up just a little bit. The primary goal is still to get an appointment booked. We're still doing a scheduler workshop series. So the primary goal is still to get them booked, but the order of events is going to switch now. Now it's not going to be where they book the appointment first. So we're going to talk about this. So the goals are still the same. Get that project created for the client, get the appointment booked. Secondary goals, get a workflow applied, and potentially, if you need a deposit, that too. But as you can see, the order of events switch up a little bit. So let's talk about now how this is going to go. So now looking at this sequence, we'll open this up here. Now what you're doing is you're only putting your lead capture form or public proposal outside of Dubsado. Like we just said, you're sharing that iframe code or the direct link on your Instagram bio, anything like that. So you're sharing that outside of Dubsado. Once they fill that out, it creates the project. It applies the workflow if you have one attached to your lead capture, same as the last time. But now, once the workflow gets applied, now it's going to send out your availability. This, like I said, is going to be where you can control who is going to be able to get on your calendar, because you have the project that gets created first, the workflow that gets applied, and then you can choose if you want to send out your scheduler to them at that point in time. So at this, in this particular sequence, you're still getting everything taken care of. It's just in a different order. So you get these two goals taken care of. So the project created the scheduler, it's just in a different order, but you're just sharing it through a lead capture form on your website. And then those things will transpire after that, after they fill out that form. So the order of events here, so let's talk about this. Client fills out the lead capture form, project gets created, workflow gets applied. The workflow will send out the scheduler now. So the workflow is applied, it sends out the scheduler, the client books the appointment goes in their project now. And then, of course, like we've said on all the other ones, the scheduler sends out those confirmation emails and appointment reminders, so you don't need those in your workflow. So that's the order of events that happens in this sequence here. Now, I get this question a lot, is how do you get this workflow to apply? Or when I'm creating my workflow, what is it that I should be using as a trigger? So in this sequence, the workflow is technically starting, or sorry, the lead capture form is technically starting your workflow. So the first action should be after workflow started, because this lead capture form is starting that project and then starting that workflow after workflow started is what you should use in this sequence as your first trigger, because the lead capture form is technically starting that workflow. So hopefully that situation makes sense as far as the sequencing goes. Again, this is really going to be prevalent for the businesses who like to qualify their leads first before they send them out their availability, kind of the opposite of the other one that we looked at. One other sequence, because we still want to talk about deposit getting paid, so I made one more here. There's not too much of a difference to it, but you'll see that it just kind of follows suit along with what we've been talking about. So here, same type of sequence, lead capture form, project gets created, workflow gets applied, Scheduler goes out somewhere in your workflow. And then if you also want to have that deposit being paid, you can turn on that invoice trigger in your scheduler so they can pay that amount. Then moving forward, as far as your workflow, you could watch for that to get paid and then continue moving on. So a lot of different ways that you can do that. But as you can see, this is a lot more linear as to what's happening there. So order of events for this one, pretty much the same as the one previous, but how it would work is client fills out the lead capture, project gets created, workflow gets applied, workflow sends the scheduler, client books the appointment, client pays the deposit, appointment gets placed in the project, invoice gets added into the project, and then the scheduler will send out those notification emails. So those are the order of events and exactly how it happens. One of the biggest reasons why I wanted to do the order of events here is because it helps to know what's happening outside of Dubsado and inside, knowing what happens on the back end and what happens on the front end at the same time. So this order of events is what happens in both sections. So hopefully that helps you understand just the overall sequencing of how Dubsado works with booking appointments. So now, just a general tip, I'm going to kind of throw a wrench in this so that it kind of gets those gears turning to understand that you really have to map out what it is that you're doing. And I'll show you why. Public proposals in Dubsado. So let's say that we do a scheduler, a public proposal, and an invoice, similar to what we did up here at this sequence. So scheduler, public proposal, deposit paid. With a public proposal, you can only use a default workflow. So what that means is we're going to take a look at a public proposal here so you guys get an understanding of what I mean. So with a public proposal, remember you have to have the space to enter in their name. So first name, last name, email is required for a public proposal because that's how the project gets created, is by them putting in their info. That's why you have to have it. So with this, in the settings menu, if we scroll down here, you'll see where it says create a new project when this proposal is completed, which you want to have happen. Just like what we said at the beginning of this webinar, you want that project created because that's how you're going to continue working with them. So you say yes to this, and now you can add in your workflow at this point. So what is a default workflow? A default workflow, it means that whoever fills out this public proposal, the exact same set of actions get added to their project every time. There's no conditional logic to public proposals yet. I know that's something that we're going to be adding in the future, but for right now, you can only do a default workflow. So that means that in this sequencing with the public proposal, only one workflow can get applied after that project gets created. It's only one workflow. So you have to take that into consideration if you're using a public proposal. This is why mapping it out is so important. Now, this is where I'm going to throw a wrench into the mix. With the lead capture form, you can also do a workflow element. So you can do the default workflow where it applies the one workflow, but you can also do the workflow element where based off of the service that they choose or the answer that they choose, it can start a different workflow. So before I open up this diagram here to explain it a little bit further, let me go into the lead capture form so you can see what I mean. So on the lead capture form in the settings menu, let's say you're doing scheduler, lead capture, and an invoice, let's say. You can have just a default workflow start, same as the public proposal where it just starts one workflow, very simple. Anyone who fills this out gets the same sequence. Or if you're familiar with adding workflows to lead captures, you can also ask a question and have a different workflow start. So this workflow element that you can ask a question on this form, it says, what service are you interested in? And you can change the question around if you want to frame it however you want to so it fits your business. But now, once they do the scheduler, they fill out the lead capture form. Depending on what answer they choose, it's going to branch out. So you can have different workflows essentially starting in this sequence. So what does that look like? That means that you can have somebody book with you, they fill out that lead capture, the project gets created. Depending on what answer they chose on that lead capture form, you could have a different workflow get applied, which means it branches out differently now. So again, writing out what is happening is so important, because if you aren't sure if they click this button, what the next set of actions is going to be, it can really mess up your entire process. So using this kind of framework where you have what's happening outside of Dubsado and then what happens once they get into Dubsado, that's the most important piece to know, is what happens on the back end once they fill out all of these things that are front facing to your clients. So lead capture form, they might pick one-on-one coaching. So that means when this project gets created, the one-on-one coaching workflow starts, or group coaching, or a mastermind. Or if you're in the design realm, maybe logo design starts, or website design, or both. So it all depends on how you're wanting these things to start. So one other piece of advice that I would say, if you're brand new to Dubsado, as you can see from this webinar, your lead capture form is so important. Taking time to understand where your entry points are going to come in from. Where do you have lead capture forms in your business? Is it just on a contact page? Do you have it up on your Facebook? Do you have different pages on your website where people can contact you? You have to get an inventory of all of your entry points, because that's how everything starts in Dubsado. So one thing, if you're brand new to the system, that I can recommend doing before doing anything else, take an inventory on your lead capture forms. Where do people come into Dubsado? Because once you understand that, then you can start building your workflows and building your process around those entry points. So hopefully that helps to help you understand the complete differences that you can have. If you do a lead capture form, it completely changes the dynamic of what's going on here. So we talked about booking outside of Dubsado. We talked about booking inside of Dubsado, how you can have that go through a workflow. Now we're going to talk about booking appointments for clients. So there's a lot of businesses where you are on the phone with somebody and they say, I want to book at this time. Or once you're done with a session, you just book their next session for them. You can do that in Dubsado. You don't have to have the client always book for you. So I wanted to add this into this webinar for those industry professionals who actually book their calls for their clients. So there's two different ways that you can do it. One that I recommend is the scheduler template way of doing it, but you can also do a fixed appointment, and I'll talk about the differences between those. The first one we're going to talk about is using the scheduler template. I would say this is the most recommended, in my opinion, because you can use workflow triggers. We're going to talk about that next week, but it just makes it where they get the confirmation emails, the appointment reminders. It just makes it better. It's a better experience, and you can do more if you use a scheduler template to book the appointment for your clients. So let's talk about that. I wrote out the steps because there's really not too many steps in order to do this. So I have the steps written in this outline for you so you can use this afterwards, but I'm going to run through these real time so you can see how to do this. So what you'll do is you'll go into a project. Again, it all runs through a project. You have to get that project created. So I'm going to go into a project first. We'll click on this test project, which is me. Then you're going to go to the appointments tab. We're talking about booking outside of Dubsado, all of that, all the different sequences we talked about. When someone books with you, it will go in this slot here in their project underneath the confirm tab. If you don't have a lead capture form attached to your scheduler, you're probably noticing that it's only on your calendar. There's no project, there's no folder. So that's why you want to have that project created, because it will go in your confirmed section where everything is located and it's on your calendar. So you get the best of both worlds that way. So what you're going to do is click on the appointments tab. You're going to click on schedule appointment, and you're going to go down to use existing scheduler template. This is where we're going to grab one of the templates that we have and we're going to book it for them. So if I click on this here, I'll open this up, and then I'm going to pick which one I want to do. Now, One thing I'm going to mention before I take the next step is it's very important that you have a different template if you're doing it this way. I'll show you why. Right now I'm in a project. They're already in Dubsado. Let's say I grab that 30-minute consultation that we've been looking at this whole time. I grab this 30-minute consultation. I click add. I'm going to add this to the project. Once it's in there, oh, I already have one in there. I was already set up, but we'll do it this way here. Let me remove these and I'll do it fresh for you. Schedule appointment, use existing template. We're going to grab that 30 minutes consultation that we've been looking at and we're going to add it in here. Now, why is it important to have a separate scheduler? You could duplicate it, but why is it important? Because when I click open, this is what you're going to do to book your appointment for your client. When you click open, it's going to open up this scheduler. Now, here's the problem. I have a lead capture form attached to this sequence, but I already have a project created. So what ends up happening is I fill out this availability, I fill out this form, and now another project gets created, which is not what we want to have happen. So what does that mean? That means that what you should do when you're booking your appointments, if you book them multiple ways, you will need to have a separate template. So if I go underneath here and I know that I actually had it with my 15-minute consultation. I believe it's this one that doesn't have a form attached to it. Let me add this in there and I'll open this up. Yes, so this one, I have a 15-minute consultation with a form attached to it, and I have a different scheduler template that doesn't have a form attached to it. You want to use the one that does not have a form attached to it. This is the reason why, because when I'm in here, I don't want to fill out another lead capture form to give them another project. I just want this to go inside of the project I'm already in. So that's why it's important, and I have this in the outline just so that you guys make sure is that you may need a separate scheduler template for this method. If your template has a lead capture form, it creates another project, which you don't want. You want it all to be in that same project. So if you're doing it this way, where you click open, once you're in the project, you click open, it takes you to this page. If you haven't, let's say you have an invoice attached to this, that's totally fine too, because then maybe you're on the phone with them. They say, okay, it's going to be $100. Read off your card number. You can put it in for them. You can do it that way if you want to and attach an invoice, but you don't want a lead capture form. Once they book their appointment, it's going to go in this project here, which is what you want. And I'm actually going to do that here. So let's say I do Saturday at 10 a.m. and I'll click submit and finish. So this is what you would do with your clients. I'm on the phone. I have a redirect URL on here that takes it to Dubsado. Hello, branding. But now inside the project, let me go to the confirm tab and I'll just refresh the page here. It's going to put that 15-minute consultation now in their confirm section. So I have it booked now. Another reason why I recommend doing it this way is because you're booking on the scheduler template itself. Because you're using this method, they're going to get the confirmation email. They're going to get the appointment reminders. All of those things still send out with this if you're using the scheduler template. Also, if you have workflows going, technically what you could do in your workflow, like I said, this will be kind of jumping into next week. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but you can have workflow triggers watch for you to book an appointment for them. I'll show you how to do that next week when we talk about workflows and scheduler templates. But that's all you're going to do. Go into their project, use existing scheduler template, click open, and then book it for them. It's really simple to do, but that way you're able to book it for them and they still get the confirmation emails and they get the appointment reminders because you're using that scheduler template. So that's how you can do it there. Let me close out of this window here. So that's how you can book it from the scheduler template. Now, one thing that I'm going to mention here, because we didn't really have a full section for this in this webinar because it's really simple, but you don't have to have a workflow in order to send out your availability to a client. I don't want for you to watch this webinar and think, so I have to have a workflow in order to send out a scheduler. You don't. If we use this same method, so let's say we have this consultation in there, And I'm just going to remove this scheduler template. So if we click schedule appointment and then we click use existing scheduler template, and we're going to grab that same 15-minute consultation and click add, you can also just click send and send it out to them. So you don't have to have a workflow in order to send out your availability. If you want to manually send out an appointment to a client, you can easily just add it into their project, click send. If you have a canned email that you've already written that goes better for this, you can use that. You can edit this if you want to. But I did want to just slide this in there. It's not really a full section, but I did want you to know that you don't have to have a workflow in order to send out your availability to a client. You can easily just go in, click send. It pops up an email composer. You can send that right out to them and then they can book with you. So just wanted to sneak that in here since we were already on this page. So now the next thing we're going to talk about is a fixed appointment, because it's a real thing in Dubsado. It's not usually what I recommend doing because you lose a lot of the functionality if you do it this way, but I do want to highlight it because it is a way that you can book an appointment. So another thing that you can do, this works really well, and we've actually had this question a few times, so this actually might be better for you in some situations. You can also click schedule appointment and click add appointment. It's a fixed appointment. When you click add appointment, you literally just type in the details of this appointment and it goes onto your calendar. What is the reason that you would use this method? If you do it this way, they will not receive any confirmation emails and they will not receive any appointment reminders. So we have had people, and I've talked to people that say, I want to book an appointment for them, but I don't want them to get any emails about confirmation or appointment reminders because they've already received those maybe from another system or something like that. What you can do is just create an appointment. It goes on your calendar. It doesn't go on the client's calendar. It only goes on yours. So you can just create an appointment in here. This works really well maybe if you want to just put in an appointment that you have at the dentist and you want to write this in there and make sure that it's not attached to any project. Technically, you could do that. Most people would do that on their Google Calendar, but you could do that. This way, it's only internal. The client doesn't receive anything once you book this. It only goes on your calendar. So it is a way that you can book an appointment that has nothing to do with the client as far as communication. So you just write in that information of what it is, the title, location, description. You can put in whatever you want there. But that would be if you do add appointment, just click add appointment there. Now, with the groups, you can, book appointments using a scheduler group. I don't really want to get too much into that because it's really the same method. Click on that, add your scheduler group. It's the same thing. So with this, it will not send out confirmation emails. And you can also click on a date on your calendar and set up a fixed appointment. So that's a little bit different. What you can do here, if we go to your calendar, is you can click on any date on your calendar and set up a fixed appointment, not a scheduler template. With the scheduler template method, you have to be in a project. But here, if we just click on any date and you say appointment, you can put in an appointment whenever you want to. This will not, like I said, go out to the client. This is just internal. But if you're using that fixed appointment method, you can always just go onto the calendar and just book it there. So that's a way that you can also book an appointment for your clients technically. But scheduler template, like I said, is the most recommended because they get those emails and you can have workflow triggers. Watch for that to get done. So that's a way you can book appointments for your clients. And then the last thing we're going to get into today, and then I'll open it up for questions, is managing appointments. So once you have those booked, then what? How do I manage this if I need to reschedule, or if the client reschedules? What if I need to cancel? What if the client cancels? A lot of people have questions about this, so I wanted to just add this at the end of this webinar so that you understand how to do it in the system. So let's say that you're the business owner and you need to reschedule your appointment with someone. It's very easy to do. All you'll do is go into the project that you have booked this with. So if we go into that same project where I have my 15-minute consultation, and we'll click into that. My computer's running slow here, so we'll just wait for that to load up. And all you're going to do is you're going to go into the appointments tab and then just simply change the time of that appointment. It's very easy. Not sure why my computer is running so slow. There we go. So if we go to the appointments tab here and we click on the appointment, it comes up with all of the details of the appointment. All you have to do to reschedule this appointment is just simply change the time. So if it's at 10 to 10:15, if I want to change it to 11 to 11:15, I can just change that and save it. Once I do that, it changes the calendar event. So it's going to change on your client's calendar. So you can reschedule this for a client. If you guys email and say, hey, it'll actually work better if we do it at this time, you can just come into this appointment, you can change it. It will update everything. So that's important to know. The emails that go out, the confirmation, the appointment reminders, the calendars, all of that will readjust on the calendar if you change it here. So that's how, if you're the business owner and you need to reschedule an appointment on your side of things, then you can just open the appointment and just change the time and it will change everything. Now, on the flip side, let's say that the client says, hey, I need to reschedule the appointment. There's two different ways that this can happen. The first way is in the email that goes out. So we talked about that, I believe it was last week, with the reschedule appointment button that goes out in the email. If you have that smart field link in the email, they can always go in and click that button. That's one way of doing it. But let's say that you don't want them to have to go through and try to find that email to reschedule. All you have to do is up here at the top, there's a little half circle icon, or a little, it's not 360. We're looking at about 270 maybe. But in here, if you click on this reschedule appointment button, it will pull up an email composer and you can send it out to them. It says, I need to reschedule, or you could change this email around and say, hey, if you need to reschedule, you can change the verbiage on there. You don't have to use this email, but this is the most important thing, is that it's sending out a link to reschedule that appointment. So you could send it out to them and have them choose when they want to reschedule it. If you haven't talked about it, you could change the verbiage and then send the email out and then have them reschedule it. Either way you want to do it, it all depends on the scenario, but that's how you're going to reschedule appointments, is either changing the time yourself in here, or you can send out that to the client and say, hey, I need to reschedule, find a time. Or you can say, hey, if you want to reschedule because you said you need to, just find a time on here that works the best and send that out. So that's going to be how you will do your rescheduling in Dubsado. Let's see, I have a couple other points here with rescheduling. Perfect. Okay, so let's say that you reschedule a appointment. There's an email that goes out to them. The client will receive an email with the updated time if the appointment gets rescheduled. The email that goes out to them is under our default template. So let me just show you here really quickly. Underneath templates and canned emails, and then edit templates, and then appointment rescheduled. So when an appointment gets rescheduled, there's an email that gets sent to them verifying that. Not only does it switch their calendar time and it puts it at the right time, but they also receive an email. This is the default email that goes out there. There's not a custom one that you can choose to send out. What you would want to do is edit this email. But this is going to give them all of the appointment details of what's going on as far as the rescheduling is concerned. So if you want to edit this, you can. If you want to leave it alone, if you're saying, hey, this looks great, sure, send it out. As long as they receive an email, you can leave it. But this is the email that will go out once you reschedule. And that happens automatically. So you can leave that or change it if you want to. But that's also important. A lot of people have questions about that. If they get updated, or if the client gets updated through email on the new time. Let's see here. Once the client reschedules, the business owner and the client will receive an email with the updated time. So if the client reschedules, so let's say you send out a reschedule to the client, they reschedule a new time, both of you will receive an email with the new time. You both get an email. So you'll be aware if a client reschedules. Also, you'll see your calendar event switch. So it does both, same thing. And I already mentioned this too, but the client can also reschedule directly from the email that has the reschedule smart field link in it. So if you have that in your email that goes out, like a confirmation email with the reschedule button, they can just do it from the email if they want to. Now let's talk about cancellation, and then I have a few general tips and we're wrapped for today. So to cancel the appointment, it's in the exact same window as the reschedule. So if we go to the appointments tab here and we'll click on the appointment, you're always going to go and click on the appointment. Here, you can click cancel appointment. And if you click cancel, you can write in a reason on why you're canceling. You're sick. Your mother needs you to go do something, whatever the case may be. You can write in a cancellation reason. Now, one important thing about the cancellation reason, in the default email that goes out to them, the cancellation email that goes out to let them know you're canceling, the cancellation reason does not get added into the original email. So let me tell you what I mean by that, or show you what I mean by that. If we go to the canned email section here under edit templates and go to appointment canceled, this is the default email. There is no smart field in here that explains why you're canceling. If you want your client to know and see the reason why, what you would do in this box here, anywhere you want to, we'll just hit enter here. Underneath smart field and then appointment, right here, you'll put in cancellation reason and add that to this email if you want them to see it. If you don't want them to see it, you can either not write something in that box, or if you really want to, you can just leave that smart field out of there and they won't be able to see the reason why. If a client cancels, you'll see the reason that they type in there. So it kind of works both ways. As far as you getting notified and also you notifying them as to why you're canceling. And I have that written down here. The client can only cancel the appointment from the email with the cancel appointment button. There's not a way where you can send an email to have them cancel, if that makes sense. So what you would want to do is, if they want to cancel, if they email you, you can go ahead and cancel it, but we don't have a once you click cancel appointment, there's not a send appointment out to them to have them cancel. We don't have that built in the system yet, but I did want to highlight that and put that in there. Awesome. So the next thing here, general tips. So these are just some overall tips for you that I want to help you out with. Rescheduling and canceling appointments can also be done directly from the calendar. When an appointment is on your calendar, we talked about doing it in a project, but you can just go to an appointment on your calendar. And as you can see up at the top, you can do those exact same things from the calendar perspective. There's also another button that says go to project if you want to actually go to that project, but you can do all this from your calendar. So the same things that I just showed you, you can do it from this aspect as well. So whatever place you feel more comfortable doing it, feel free to do that. The next thing, when a client cancels an appointment, the appointment does stay on your calendar and the word canceled is added to the appointment title. I'm not sure if you're watching this, if you've seen that yet, but basically what happens is it leaves that appointment on your calendar and the word canceled gets put on there. So you'll see from your calendar, it says canceled. However, the spot is now available for people to book. So even though you'll see it on your calendar and it says canceled, once they cancel it, it frees up that space. So you might see it where, let's say you have a 9:15 and somebody cancels that appointment and then another person books at that time. You'll see two events on there because it opens up that space. You'll just see the word canceled in front of that appointment there. So that's what happens on your calendar once you cancel an appointment. So that's important that I wanted to share. When an appointment is rescheduled, and I talked about this earlier, all workflow triggers that are watching that appointment will be adjusted to the new time that's selected. So if you have workflows that are running that are watching a certain appointment, all that will get updated. We kind of talked about that a little earlier, but if you reschedule, everything will change on there. The workflow actions will continue. They'll look at the new appointment time and send out according to the new appointment. So it all adjusts. We get that question a lot. So I wanted to clarify that. The very last thing, and then we'll talk about just the upcoming sessions, and I'll open it up for questions. When an appointment is canceled, all workflow triggers that are watching that appointment get grayed out. They get skipped over. So if you have something, let's say, to send them out a form a day before their appointment, and that appointment gets canceled, in your workflow, those actions get grayed out and it skips over those. So that's something else. A lot of people want to know, what if they cancel? Is my workflow still going to send things? It won't send that out if they cancel. It grays it out on your workflow, basically meaning we're not having this appointment, so it's going to skip over it because that appointment's not there anymore. So those are just some general tips for you. There's probably 1,000 other tips that we could get into, but those are some of the big ones and big questions we get asked a lot.